constructing a sample space. We said a sample space was a listing of all possible outcomes. So when you roll a 6-sided die, the sample space would be either 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. Those are the only 6 things that can happen when you roll a 6-sided die. What about a couple having 3 children? We're talking about, really that needs to be worded better, because we don't know if we're talking about the weights of the children, the eye color of the children. It's supposed to say the gender of the children. What's a sample space for the gender outcome? Would be more precise. A couple's going to have 3 children. What are the possible gender outcomes for their 3 children? Well, the first kid's either going to be what? A boy or a girl. So that's right. My first kid's a boy possibilities in one column, and first kid's a girl possibility in another column. What about the second child? Or let me say it this way. If the first kid is a boy, then what could the other 2 be? You could have a boy and then another boy and then a girl, or you could have a boy and then a girl and then a boy. Is there anything else that could happen if the first kid's a boy? Oh, they could all be boys. Is there anything else that can happen if the first kid's a boy? Oh, the next 2 could be girls. So if the first child is a boy, there are 4 things that can happen after that. Either a boy and then a girl and a boy, 2 more boys, or 2 more girls. That's the only 4 things that can happen if the first kid's a boy. If the first kid's a girl, there are also 4 possible things that could happen. You could have a boy and then another girl, or a girl and then a boy, or a girl and 2 boys, or a girl and 2 more girls. Now this gets pretty complicated or pretty tedious when you talk about 4 children or 5 children. You start having lots of possibilities there. But just writing gender outcomes for 2 or 3 children is not too bad. Just assume the first is a boy and then see what the others could be. Then assume the first is a girl and see what the others could be. So there are how many possible gender outcomes? 8. If all 8 are equally likely, find the probability of getting exactly 2 girls and 1 boy. How many of those possibilities have exactly 2 girls and 1 boy? 2 girls and 1 boy. This one had 2 girls and 1 boy. This one has 2 girls and 1 boy. This one has 2 girls and 1 boy. Are there any others? Nope. There are only 3 of the 8 that have exactly 2 girls and 1 boy. So what's the probability of exactly 2 girls and 1 boy? Probability of 2 girls and 1 boy is 3 out of 8. What's the probability that you have 3 boys out of 3 children? There's only one way. If you're having 3 kids, there's only one way that you could have 3 boys, and that's if every one of them is a boy. There's only 1 out of the 8 ways that that can happen. Any questions? All right. We've been saying unusual is shocking. We said we have two definitions of unusual so far. We've said something is unusual if it's more than how many standard deviations from the mean. More than 2 standard deviations from the mean, that's one way we've described unusual. What about z-scores? What z-scores are unusual? You mean between -2 and 2? Outside -2 and +2. So we have those definitions of unusual. We're going to touch on unlikely versus unusual, and that'll probably be all we say about unlikely for the rest of the semester. An outcome is unlikely if its probability is very small, such as 0.05 or less. If something has a very small probability, you say it's unlikely. For example, if you toss a coin 1,000 times, what's the probability that you'll get exactly 520 heads? There's only 1 out of 1,000 ways that you could get exactly 520 heads. Now, if it says at least 520 heads, then that's 520, 21, 22. There's a whole bunch of those. But there's only one way you can have exactly 520 heads if you have exactly 480 tails. There's only one way that can happen. One way out of 1,000 possible outcomes, or 0.001. What if it had been probability of exactly 500 heads out of 1,000 tosses? What would that probability be? It's still, there's only one way you can get exactly 500 heads. You get exactly 500 heads and 500 tails. That's the only way that can happen. So the probability would be 1 out of 1,000. For any given outcome, if I want exactly 1 head out of 1,000, then the probability of that happening is 1 out of 1,000. An outcome is unusual if it's far from what we would expect. This is unlikely. Because the probability is very low. But to say something is unusual means it's far from what we would expect. Is 520 heads far from what you would expect to get if you tossed a coin 1,000 times? You would be expecting how many heads? 500? 520 wouldn't seem shocking then. So it's not unusual. It's unlikely that you'll have exactly 520 heads, but you wouldn't be shocked if you did, because it's not very far from what you would have been expecting anyway. Now you're going to really have to squint hard and develop some forehead wrinkles to get the difference between unlikely and unusual. But I've given you both definitions. You just have to study them. Unlikely is a very low probability, and that is a very low probability. But unusual is far from what we would expect, and that's not far from what we would expect. Yes, sir. Right. I'm trying to think about the best way to answer that. Unusual is statistically more important. I don't think we're going to use the words unlikely again. But if you say something that's like saying which is bigger, or which is more valuable, an apple or an orange. They can't really be put in order. I don't think you can put unusual and unlikely in order. They just mean different things. Unlikely means the probability of it happening is very small. Unusual means it's not far from what, or it is far from what you would expect. But to say that one of those has a greater degree of magnitude than the other, I don't think I can say that. This is one of my least favorite slides, because it does give me extra wrinkles on my forehead. Oh, yes. Yes, something can be both unlikely and unusual. Something could be not unlikely and not unusual. Something could be unusual, but I'd have to think hard about whether it could be unusual but not unlikely. It could be unlikely but not unusual. Don't lose sleep over this one problem in the homework. It's not even on the test. Okay? You might make a 95 instead of 100 on the homework, but I'm promising you are not going to have to distinguish between unlikely and unusual on the test. You will have to continue to say whether something's unusual. And we can fall back on our more than 2 standard deviations from the mean for that. All right, last thing. And this is the one unlikely or unusual problem that there's something like it on the homework, but not the test. If we assume that 400 births are randomly selected and use subjective judgment to determine whether the given outcome is unlikely, also determine whether it is unusually high or unusually low, in a sense that it's far from what you would expect. Okay, so we're going to write unlikely or not unlikely, and then we're going to write unusual or not unusual. And if something is unusual, we're going to say it's unusually high or unusually low. If I surveyed 400 babies born on a certain day, how many girls would I be expecting? I'd be expecting 200. Probably wouldn't be shocked at 210. Wouldn't be shocked at 190. What's the probability of getting exactly 205 girls? There's only one way that can happen. Did you say 1 out of 400? Yeah, okay. There's only the probability of exactly 205 girls is 1 out of 400. Is that unlikely? That's pretty low probability. You could change it to a decimal, but it'd be a very small, certainly less than 0.05. So that is unlikely that you would have exactly 205 girls. Is it very far from what you were expecting, though? No? So would you say it's unusual or not unusual? Not unusual. Not shocking. Not unusual. What about the probability of exactly 380 girls? What's the probability that you would have exactly 380 girls? No. How many different ways can you have exactly 380 girls? One. That it's messing with my head too, but there's only one, oops, typo. There's only one way that you can have exactly 380 girls, and that's if you have 380 girls and 20 boys. So that is also unlikely. Is that very far from what we were expecting? Yeah, that is unusual. And is it unusually high or unusually low? That's way more girls than we were expecting. And then the probability of exactly 111 girls. How many possible ways could there be exactly 111 girls? Only one way out of 400. Again, that's unlikely. Is that very far from what we were expecting? I'm going to say yeah. That's way less than I was expecting. So yes, that's unusually low.